and welcome to episode 79 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, Toyota gets serious about EVs. Well, sort of. Elon's set to add frickin' laser beams to his cars. Ford gets out of India while Tesla looks to get in. And I bravely try plant-based chicken at KFC so you won't have to. All that and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show. Brian, you know that people in EVs, they get something called iced, which is an expression we use when you go to an EV charger station, a public EV charger station, and you there's an ICE vehicle, an internal combustion engine ICE vehicle parked there, either to piss you off or because they're just too stupid to realize they're parking somewhere that they don't understand what an electric vehicle is, and that happens a lot. Yeah. Well, I got blocked from charging at home.
What?
And it was a bit of an issue. Last week, we had ourselves a heck of a day because my wife phoned and said she had a flat tire at work for the second time in 6 months. And we just got new tires for her car. And so she had to come home and I had to drive her to, I had to go fix her car for one thing. So first thing I do, I run over there and I inflate the car. And all these guys are trying to help me. They think that I'm this helpless old man and I can't jack up a car. And there's 5 of them. They're students at the school, like young adults, like say 18, 19. And they're more capable than me, but, you know, they're not smarter than me. And so I kept trying to get rid of them. And it was COVID, you know, I didn't want any help from them. Long story short, I went to Canadian Tire, bought a new tire inflator to replace my old tire inflator, inflated her tire, good enough to drive to the store to get it fixed. And anyway, I had to drive her back, and she had something to pick up my daughter after school, and I didn't plug in my Leaf the night before, my city car Leaf, so I didn't have many electrons to do all this stuff. And so what I needed to do, my wife was going to work from home in the afternoon, I needed to charge desperately so that she could have enough power to do what she needed to do after work to pick up my daughter. Well, there's suddenly construction on my street, and they wouldn't let me go to my own house to charge. I have never experienced that before.
Yeah, well, usually when there's some kind of construction, like they have, you know, closed, but local traffic is allowed through. So they weren't allowing any local traffic.
Yeah, no, we were sort of surveyed it from either end going back and forth. And somebody tried to be local traffic on the other side of the boulevard, got horribly honked at by a guy in a very big vehicle. Like monstrous towering vehicle was, you know, like a horn that would knock birds off their nest a mile away. It was a big horn that he was angrily honking. So I just said, screw it, though. I mean, they moved around on our side a bit, and I just went for it and went and parked in my damn spot. And by the time the afternoon was done, they were gone. But it was an issue.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, normally we would have said, okay, we'll park at the end of the block and walk home, and that'll be fine. But I needed the charge. So.
No, and which reminds me of a story that we did not include this week because we got too much stuff, but I'll just bring it up quickly. In the UK, they have passed a law that all new houses have to have an EV charging plug-in on them. They're the first country to do this, mandate electric car chargers at home.
What's new with you?
Yeah, so what's new with me is going to be a new segment on the show called Story Time with Grandpa.
Story time with Grandpa. Story time with Grandpa. It's story time with Grandpa. Brian Stockton. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you for the music. That was awesome. So I'm not technically a grandpa, but this is the kind of story I always feel really old when I tell a story like this. And I know a while ago I mentioned that I'm old enough to remember when we got the very first McDonald's built in our city. Like it was around 19...
I was telling that to one of my kids the other day. Old man Stockton remembers when we got our first McDonald's. They were quite taken by that.
Yeah, and it was around 1970. I was 5 or 6 years old, and we had heard about McDonald's because we'd seen the TV commercials. And then when it opened, it was just the biggest deal ever. But anyway, so I was having a Beyond Burger at A&W the other day, and I know you're going to talk about some fake chicken later on. But when I go to A&W now, I usually get the Beyond Meat Burger, fake meat burger. And I was eating it, and of course now they've switched to paper straws when they give you a drink, right? Lots of places have switched to paper straws.
Yeah.
In fact, I believe there's legislation now that single-use plastics like that are going to be illegal soon if they're not already. But anyway, sitting there drinking from this paper straw, it just triggered a memory from when I was 5 or 6 years old, and this would be tied to the first McDonald's opening. But when I was a kid in the late 60s, early 70s, most straws were paper. And you're a couple years younger, so you probably don't even remember that. So this is really...
Gather around, children. Grandpa's talking. He's saying some remarkable things here.
Yeah, so paper straws...
Are you kidding me? They used to be made out of paper back then?
Super common. And then I think it was McDonald's that turned the tide to plastic straws. And I just had this memory because... And the plastic straw or the paper straws were even worse back then. Like you would just suck on it for a few minutes and the whole thing would kind of collapse and fall apart.
Oh my God, Grandpa.
The move to plastic straws kind of made sense, but here's the memory that I had. I remember when I was about 5 or 6 years old when we started switching to plastic straws. And I remember thinking back then, even though I was only 5 years old, I was thinking, gee, this seems kind of wasteful. You use something plastic one time, throw it in the garbage. Yeah. Even as a 5 or 6 year old, I thought that was wasteful.
Well, a lot of people miss their plastic straws, Brian Stockton. A lot of people miss them.
You can buy a stainless steel one that you can clean and carry with you, and that gives you the proper. But I'm okay with the paper.
Yeah, my wife does that, and I don't understand it because a bug could crawl in there. The nice thing about straws are they're sanitary.
Skinny brush to clean it with?
Yeah. You don't want to clean my straw. It's not, I don't want to do that. I'll take the paper straw. The paper straws have a taste and they do break down. Although, Brian, I think they're getting better. Since they've been doing this for a couple of years at a lot of restaurants, I think there's been some improvements. I can't remember where, but I was someplace, a fancier restaurant, not a fast food, a level above fast food, which is my peak. My ceiling in restaurants is one level above fast food. And it was better.
I remember when they brought in the legislation, or this might have been in British Columbia, where I think the law came in first. They gave bubble tea places like an extra year on the plastic straw ban because bubble tea requires a bigger, kind of thicker straw. Yeah,
what about milkshakes? I've always wondered about milkshakes because you need a very powerful straw for milkshakes.
Yeah, and I can't say that I've had a milkshake with a paper straw, so I don't know.
Impossible. I can't see it happening. It would have to be a very liquidy milkshake. Anyway, let's get to our first story, Brian.
Yeah, so Toyota, we like to mention them on the show and mock them for their lack of movement in the EV world. James is a longtime Toyota Prius owner and driver, but they have been absolutely slacking on the EV front. Well, they have finally announced a big expenditure, $13.5 billion. Toyota is going to invest on battery development. This is between now and 2030, with the goal of reducing the battery cost per vehicle by 50%. They have the Toyota BZ4X electric crossover that's going to come out supposedly next year. They've only ever sold electric cars in China before because they have to. It's just another announcement of a massive spending on batteries. Their goal is to make them cheap enough so that they can move over from the internal combustion engines. But yeah, I thought it bared mentioning because we have been calling Toyota laggards in this space, and they've finally announced a big spend.
Is it greenwashing?
It's probably greenwashing, but let's give them
the benefit of the doubt for a while. But this sounds to me like, oh yeah, okay, we'll do EVs, but we're going to do it better than everyone else. We're going to reduce the price by 50%. So we're not just going to get into EVs. We're going to beat everyone else by 50%. And I don't know. I'm a little bit skeptical about that, and it's a wait and see. And it also sounds like it's going to be too long. Like we're reaching an inflection point. We'll get to that later in the show. Some data that's coming in on inflection points around the world. But we're getting to some serious inflection points. Even in North America, it's starting to get going a little bit. and the numbers are getting a little bit more serious. We're getting to the point in the hockey stick where it's going to start pointing upward real soon. So it's concerning for them.
No, and the 13.5 billion is through the year 2030. So, that's really only a couple of billion per year. It's yeah, we'll see how they do.
All right, let's cover some Tesla news.
Okay, lots and lots of Tesla news this week. So the Tesla Model S Plaid set a new record on the Nürburgring, famous racetrack in Europe where car makers go to test their cars and go for bragging rights. So Tesla now holds the record for the fastest production electric car around the Nürburgring, about 7 minutes and 35 seconds. It's always confusing because there's different categories and even different lengths of track, but that's the record, fastest production electric car ever.
Yeah. Okay. So the Shanghai supercharger factory is open. Is that right?
Yeah. So Tesla has built a new factory in China, in Shanghai, to make superchargers for their supercharger stations. And it's a big deal because they're going to be able to make 10,000 supercharger stations per year out of this factory. And there's currently only 25,000 of these around the world. So within a couple of years, they should be able to double the number of chargers. And they're going to need to, because, as you say, the hockey stick is about to point up for adoption. They're about to open the network to other vehicle brands, not just Tesla. And they still have their other factory making them, I believe. So, they'll be making more than 10,000 a year.
So the idea, too, though, is to get the price down overall, as well as just to be able to output a lot of them. So I'm taking that in Shanghai. Where are they made now? Is it North America?
I think it's in New York State, but don't quote me on
that. So the idea probably is big factory, Chinese factory, cheaper.
Yeah, they should be able to make more and just a greater volume. You get economies of scale. So yes, they should be able to make them faster and cheaper.
So Tesla is really going hard on their Shanghai factory producing cars.
Yeah, record numbers coming out for last month for August, most vehicles ever produced. They still have to deliver those vehicles, so this is the final month of the quarter. So there's going to be another end of the quarter push, like there always is with Tesla, to actually get all these vehicles delivered, both in China, in Europe, in North America. There's always a bit of a crazy rush, to get this done at the end of the quarter.
Right. Well, what about this?
Frickin' laser beam!
Yeah, so no one's really sure how this is going to work or if it's going to work. But there was a big story this past week that Tesla has officially obtained a patent on the idea of using lasers as windshield wipers or to clear things off the windshield. And it's nobody knows if it will actually come to pass. Lots of things get patented and never actually go into production. But if you look at pictures of the Cybertruck, it doesn't really look like there's a space to put the windshield wipers on their prototype that we've seen. Doesn't. So maybe the final version will just look different and it'll probably just have regular wipers. But it's kind of a wild patent, and maybe someday you can use lasers as a windshield wiper.
The thing is, though, like lasers blind you.
That's the downside, yeah.
That's what I don't understand. I think this is exciting and interesting. I just don't want lasers shooting at me as I'm driving around down the road at night. And then, I'm blind for the rest of my life. That's not an appealing thing. I mean, maybe it's for full self-driving. Maybe it just cleans a little place where the camera is.
Or it could just be for cleaning the cameras or, something like that. But, from the picture, it sounds like they're going to shoot upwards, kind of from the hood area, shoot up the windscreen.
I see. So sort of on the surface, along the surface, maybe.
Yeah. And I guess if there's a loose laser beam, it would, maybe it could start a forest fire in a tree or something. I don't know. But
good luck if you're a bug crawling up there, buddy.
Yeah.
So that's pretty crazy. Listen, the full self-driving beta that Musk was talking about, beta 10, is out there, and I have a confession to make. I watched a video and I wasn't that impressed. How about you?
It's always the kind of thing, whenever there's a new version of the FSD beta, I watch some videos on YouTube and I'm partly like super impressed and then partly kind of like deflated because, they still make dumb mistakes. It's definitely an improvement, but yeah, every time there's a new release, you kind of think, okay, well, that's an amazing improvement, but how many more of these improvements is it going to take? Is it going to be, 5, 10, or is it going to be 100? Like it could take 200 more releases for this to be actually usable.
It could, but at some point the whole thing could just start learning on its own and take off. We don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the improvements are exponential. I think they're getting faster. So this is version 10.0. The next version coming out apparently soon, in a few weeks, 10.1 or perhaps 10.2. They're merging all the stacks. So not that I really understand this, but currently they have the highway driving stack of software that they use, and that's still the old version. And then they have this new version for city streets, which is all the new software. And by the next release, they're going to merge that, and it's going to be all the same software stack that's doing city streets and highways. So that in itself should be a big improvement, but, it's probably also a step back too, because the highway one worked really well. So, it's always, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, I think, but getting it to one software stack, I think is a big deal and should help a lot.
Tesla was blocked in New Mexico from opening a storefront. A number of states have come out and used archaic laws from years ago to try and prevent Tesla from they're idiots from selling cars. There's the lobby of the dealerships, the ICE dealerships, but yeah, what's that about?
Yeah, so there are several states that do not allow the sale of Tesla vehicles in America because there are these old kind of anti-monopoly laws that said that the car makers weren't also allowed to own the car dealerships. But, this was set like 100 years ago, and it applied back then. It doesn't really apply now. So Tesla has had to fight the legislation in different states and come up with workarounds where maybe there's a service center just across the border in another state or something. But what they did to get around it in New Mexico was launch it on native land, sovereign land from a tribal land in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So a First Nations group has sovereignty over this land, and they're able to do what they want, and that includes a Tesla service center where you can also sell cars.
That's just ridiculous. I hope they sell 1 million of them.
Yeah,
screw the man.
I mean, maybe it's a good business for these First Nations to get into. So maybe it's a win-win.
Benefits them, brings people onto the reserve. Money gets spent. Good stuff. I wanted to talk about India because India has a scooter factory that we've talked about before in the show that is opening. The start of sales for the Ola Electric scooters have begun. This is a big deal because of so many 2- and 3-wheel vehicles in India, which create more pollution than cars, ICE cars. So they're making electric versions of these vehicles at a lower price than previously imagined, and also initial annual capacity of 2 million of them. That is a lot to start, and getting up to 10 million units per year soon. Built locally in India, and that factory is already open. It's key for India, which is the largest 2-wheeled market in the world. Around 15 million 2-wheelers are sold annually, with gas motorbikes still heavily outselling electric alternatives. So we're hoping that this will change that within a short period of time, because 10 million a year, that's a year and a half that they could replace them all if they, all went well. Otherwise, though, they are going around the world for export. Yeah,
that's a big deal. That's every vehicle market is slightly different, and that's important for India for sure.
So San Francisco has banned an electric vehicle.
Yeah, so this has happened in a couple of places. So as we've talked about on the show, the Chevy Bolt electric vehicle has unfortunately taken to bursting into flames occasionally. But it's important to note that this is still at a much lower rate then gasoline cars catch on fire. But the problem with the Chevy Bolt fires is they're kind of spontaneous. They kind of happen for no particular reason, whereas if a gas car catches on fire, it's usually from an accident or somebody throwing a match or something like that. But news has spread enough about the Chevy Bolt catching on fire that there is a couple of parking lots in San Francisco that have posted notices saying Chevy Bolts are not allowed to park here.
Oh, my
because
goodness.
they might burst into flames.
Wow. That's pretty prejudiced. I mean, considering how many actually have burst into flames, it's not that many.
It's really, really not that many. But you remember there was a kind of a similar thing a few years ago with some Samsung smartphones.
Yeah, on planes, which is not
on
good.
airplanes. Yeah,
You can't take a Chevy Bolt on a plane.
There were some smartphones that would occasionally spontaneously catch on fire with the battery, so they were banned from flights for a while. But it didn't seem to hurt Samsung in the long run.
Statistically, I'll bet you a lot of those cars, even though it's San Francisco, are still ICE cars. And I'll bet you that statistically, there's a better chance of an ICE vehicle starting on fire than a Chevy Bolt.
But it's parked in the parking lot. The gas car is probably not going to just spontaneously combust where there is a
mine did
slight
once.
chance. Oh, yeah?
They do occasionally do that after you've turned them off. Because, I mean, if you're driving and then you get there and you turn it off and something's shorting out or something, it can happen. So, I mean, that sort of stuff irks me. That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, I do recall. I have a friend who started his car on the street in Toronto one day and it just caught on fire. So I guess it can be spontaneous.
That's a bad day when that happens. So I wanted to talk about Wright Electric, an American startup company. This is electric aviation talk here, people. Always love to talk about this stuff and see how it's going. We're going to keep track of this stuff and sort of track the progress over the next 10 years. They've got a new 2 megawatt motor specifically for airplanes that is 2 times more energy output dense than other motors. That is to say, a motor of the same size previously for airplanes only puts out half the megawatt power of energy. Now, same size motor, and this is important for planes to have the same weight. We talk about energy density in batteries, but not energy output density in things. Because that sort of gets important too when it comes to aviation. So they made a 2x improvement, which is huge. And this stuff could continue, Brian. People say it's not possible. You have 2x improvements. Boy, eventually things happen. It is the largest propulsive aerospace motor in existence. It is about 2 times larger than other propulsive motors in testing. It will be key for making larger passenger jets. Get this. To make a large passenger jet, like you have to add about 10 of these suckers, and you can get like a Boeing 737. I mean, the problem is powering them. Okay.
For a long period of time.
For a long period of time. But if you see electric plane jet prototypes, passenger jet prototypes, you'll see that they, they've got like 5 motors, propeller motors on each wing and stuff like that. So you can use hydrogen. That's one idea. One path is hydrogen. The other path would be shorter haul flights with batteries that have improved in energy density over time. So that's what we're looking for. And speaking of India,
get these short haul flights taken care of. I mean, most flights that I would ever take are within North America and kind of short. And it's those having to cross the ocean. That's going to be the last stuff to be converted.
Dirigibles, Brian, dirigibles, bring them back.
I would love a dirigible.
Did you know what? Since the 9/11 attacks, I sort of got into looking at some things on that, and sort of got interested because somebody had mentioned the plane, the bomber, the B-50. There was a World War II bomber that hit the Empire State Building in just after the war in fog.
Yes, I do vaguely remember that story. Yeah.
So I read an account of it, and apparently. The big pointy thing on top of the Empire State Building,
it's for dirigible docking.
It's for dirigible docking, which was a scam because they just wanted to make a higher building because somebody else was making a building that high that was going to outdo them. So they said, we want to tie some dirigibles up there in the heavens and have them blow around and people will just walk down to the top of the building. Never happened.
No, and for a short film that I made one time, I had to have a scene that was set in the year 2081, and I took our legislative building and I just sort of added spaceships and stuff to the shot to make it look like the future. And one thing I added was a dirigible docking to the top of the dome as a kind of a tribute to that idea.
I probably missed that. I'll have to look at that again. That probably
it
went
goes
over my
by
head.
quickly in that.
Yeah.
Film.
Ford pulls out of India, and they've picked up shop. What's up with that? That's kind of like, it says something. Are they all just going large vehicles and screw the little ones, or what?
Well, clearly they saw an opportunity in India. They began operations there in 1995, but they've spent about $2 billion over the last 25 years, and they never really managed to sell that many vehicles, maybe something like 80,000 vehicles a year, something like that. And so they've decided to pull out of India, and it's just interesting because I know you tweeted this out, that electrification has got a lot to do with this, because you've got a company like Tesla who is dying to get into India.
Yeah.
But they're going to get in with electric vehicles, which is something that has a future. And Ford, there's just no future in India for what they do. And, they're not going to switch to EVs quickly enough. So probably best for them to take the loss and run. But it's certainly a sign of things to come, I think.
Yeah, it makes me think that they're not that committed as they say they are to electrification when something like that happens. It sort of shows their true colors.
Yeah, because they could see India as an opportunity like Tesla does, but they don't. They're just going to pull out.
I've got a little bit of feedback here, and I'm excited to present our first TikTok feedback, Brian.
Fantastic.
There's lots of different ways you can get a hold of us, and I'm going to tell you what they are right now. cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, and we absolutely love to hear from you. And don't be shy. We love to hear anything you have to say. On TikTok or Twitter, our handle is Clean Energy Pod. Yes, we're on TikTok. Yes, people watch our videos on TikTok. I throw something on YouTube, nine views. Throw something on TikTok, 650.
Fantastic.
I don't know why. But and I see that people are spending more hours watching TikTok than they are YouTube. Either are probably not healthy, but having observed my kids, you could leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. And please do not forget to check out our YouTube channel like 9 other people's satisfied customers have. We finally have an actual address for you. It's youtube.com/the Clean Energy Show. And we have a friend of ours on TikTok, Cyber Mike, I think is his handle. He's been following us for a while and talking to us. I heard that in a super cold environment, the Tesla iron batteries that we talked about last week aren't good. Remember that? What are they called?
Lithium iron phosphate, the LFP batteries. So Tesla is switching to those with their standard range cars in some places, and maybe eventually all the kind of lower range cars will be the iron-based batteries. But it's possible that they aren't quite as good in the cold. There's, always pluses and minuses with every battery chemistry. So that could be not great news for us here who live in the frigid north.
Now, Tesla Daily, the podcast and YouTube channel, looked at this, and they said that after researching it, that all the articles written on this topic were based on one news item in China where a Tesla employee was quoted. The customer he was dealing with was driving in winter conditions where EVs are known to have far less range. His car, which is similarly equipped to yours, Brian, I think a little over 400 kilometers, only got 250 kilometers in winter. Well, quelle surprise.
I could tell you that on a frigid cold day with a headwind, I was down to around 200 kilometers of range. So, it's probably roughly the same.
And that's on the highway. So
on the highway,
where your range goes down too. So we live in a very cold part of Canada. So and China varies climate wise. So it could have been a cold place. I'm not sure, but it's driving conditions and certain circumstances vary with EVs because they're so efficient that when you have something working against it, it really affects your range, which is why I constantly suggest getting a bigger battery than you think you need. And by the way, coming up on the show, Brian, the lightning round, where we skip through the rest of this week's headlines. And now I have a special segment of Oil Ban once again.
Oil Ban.
This is where we talk about states, jurisdictions, countries, continents banning the sale of gas vehicles. New York State is banning the sale of gas vehicles by 2035. Great news. I can't be too critical about that timing. It's okay. It's not late, but I mean, some places are earlier than that, right?
Yeah, 2035 is decent. And of course, these things will probably get changed and moved and updated. And I mean, if they're not making enough electric vehicles by 2035, then, some of these targets will have to be changed. But it quite possibly will be in the other direction when there's lots of electric vehicles made and very few gas vehicles made. And, hopefully they can get there sooner than 2035. And they may not even have to change the legislation for that.
Not everyone's going to agree with me, but you have to believe that self-driving taxis, electrified taxis, will be abundant by then. It's hard to believe otherwise. Even if Tesla weren't the company to do it, somebody would, like Waymo or somebody would.
By 2035, absolutely.
So some other little thoughts here on the way this is going. This is something we like to keep an eye on because this is what makes us happy. The Kia Niro EV led the Netherlands EV sales to a 30% plug-in share in August. So that's all electric, battery electric cars and plug-in hybrids. As long as it has a plug, it got up to 30% in the Netherlands. Electric vehicles in the States, I'm surprised to see, are actually this is probably a plug-in and hybrid plug-in. 7.8%, almost 8% in Q1 of 2021. So that's 1 in 13 vehicles. Year before, same quarter, 1 in 20. So that's moving along at a fairly steep rate.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Tesla ramps up their production, that number is going to go up.
And you'd have to think that 8% starts to get inflection pointy. I just made up that expression. Feel free to use it.
That's nice.
It's inflection pointy. I think that between 7 and 16 is inflection point territory from everything I've read. The question is there enough choice out there? Is there enough cars? Is there enough batteries for this inflection to actually take off when it wants to? This is something we need to look at.
No, and of course, we often update on legislation in the U.S. Like the President Biden has been proposing these potential EV subsidies to kind of juice the market, support the old automakers. And I hesitate to talk about it because every time we talk about it, it keeps changing. The legislation has still not passed.
Yep.
The number goes up, the number goes down, but it's a potential massive subsidy to electric car makers. And this should help with, getting enough of them made.
The U.S. numbers that I quoted to you are from Cox Automotive and Kelley Blue Book. Regarding the states, the banning of, states like New York and things, there's 8 states in the United States that are 50% of the market, and 29 states are only 10%. So a lot of these bigger states like California and New York to begin with, and Washington State, that makes a big difference. If half the country is banning electric vehicles, they're just not going to be able to make ICE engine and get away with it and make money.
No, and as I often say, where we are in the middle of the prairies in Canada, one of the smaller provinces population-wise, we will be probably the last people to get the gasoline cars sold. That the Ontario and Quebec and BC, they have incentives for electric vehicles, so we're going to get shoveled all the gas cars here, I think, as we transition.
For free, though. They'll be free.
Yeah.
They'll be giving them away. And by the way, I have not gotten my letter from the insurance company telling me I have to pay a road tax.
Yeah, so we have a new electric vehicle road tax for the 400 electric vehicles that we have in our province.
Such an important thing to do.
It's, it's annoying and depressing, but...
have you got your letter yet?
Well, we got the letter, and the charge starts in a month or two. I can't remember, but yeah, it's depressing. And I don't mind paying taxes. I don't mind paying fees. And this goes to supporting the road infrastructure, but it's just way too soon to be charging. It's going to cost them more to administer the fund than they're going to collect from the fee.
I wish we had a free press that would go after that story and ask them.
Yeah. What does it cost to administer?
I've got NDP people. I've got the opposition government people, including the leader who follow me on Twitter. I'm going to ask that question. They can ask it in the legislature in the government session and find out, because I want to know. And then they can get a report back. They won't report back, but I would like to know. So Illinois is to shut all fossil fuel plants, this is hot off the press, by 2045 and invest $580 million per year in renewables. Not bad.
Well, as we often discuss, renewables are cheaper in the long run. So, the smarter places are going to do it, and they're going to do it quick.
The advance continues.
And it's time for the March Forward, my new segment where we talk about things that are moving forward here on the clean energy, green transportation front. And I forgot to mention that I went to Saskatoon. Well, I mentioned that, but I went to Saskatoon. I went up the highway 2.5 hours, and halfway there's a little town with an A&W that everybody stops at. Go pee, stretch your legs, buy something. Well, I went there hungry because we're going to my uncle's house, and he always serves us healthy food, so I need to carb up before I go there. And it always works out, and my family thanked me last time. So I went there, and I was looking at the plant-based burger there, and in Davison, Saskatchewan, Canada, it is the same price as similarly priced burgers. Now, our thesis on the show, and something we've been pushing from Tony Seba and Rethink X and other people who've been examining economic disruptions in cleaner tech, say that plant-based meals, food alternatives will be cheaper. Well, I saw price parity. It's not here in Regina, but I saw it on the road. Price parity. I went to check out, I didn't eat it, but I went through Burger King once, and it was 80 cents premium one week, and next week I went and it was 70 cents. And in the KFC popcorn chicken, which they don't have anymore here, never got a chance to try it, was price parity already when they introduced it. They didn't say it was for a limited time, so maybe some markets still have that. Anyway, I tried fake chicken at KFC this week. Now, I've been wanting to do this for a long time because I've seen it on the menu, but it is a plant-based sort of food, and
like a chicken tender.
Well, no, it was a chicken sandwich, Brian. It was a chicken sandwich, and I have a clip. Here we go. I'm not really tasting chicken, but I'm not really tasting anything. I bet you, if you weren't paying attention, if you served these at the office, people wouldn't know any better. So I ate it on camera, so you can go watch that on YouTube or the TikTok. You know, you can see my genuine reactions. Now, I had one mouthful that was a bit vegetable-y. I'm very sensitive to these things. I'm not a good try new things person. I get queasy easily. But I had a pretty good time eating this burger. Now, one of the reasons is you got a nice soft bun. You've got plastered with mayo and breaded breading that's deep fried on the outside. And that's really what you taste when you eat a chicken sandwich at a fast food restaurant. But I thought it was pretty good. It was crunchy. Now, it was dry, and they served it to me instantly. I went to the drive-thru window and brought it home. I thought I'd have to wait for 5 minutes for them to cook it. No, they had one sitting around. So that probably didn't help. Looking at the texture, which you can see on the video, hard to tell. It's whitish, textury stuff. And my point is, this stuff will be cheaper than real chickens. Chickens cost money to make. I worked in a documentary on agriculture, and I saw what chickens do where they live. I didn't like it. I'm not a vegetarian, but I would like to be. It's just, I don't like vegetables, Brian. That's my problem. But I think it's doable. And, A&W is, for a temporary time, has chicken nuggets that are plant-based. I want to try those too. You should. There's an assignment for you next time you're at the bison. Yeah. Share them with the family. See what happens.
Do I have to make a video and put it on the TikTok?
Well, sure. If you put things on the TikTok, good things can happen. That's all I have to say. Good things can happen, and bad things.
I'm worried people will yell at me.
Well, they're mostly kids, so you can easily disregard them. I just like it, and I think that, here's what I think. I think that at the end of this decade, when our show is over, you'll walk into Burger King, you'll see the Impossible Whopper for $4. You'll see a beef animal-based Whopper for $7. What you gonna buy? The one that could give you E. coli? The one that might have a bit of ground up bone in it? The one that a cow died for your sins for? I mean, what are you gonna pick if it's, And they're gonna get better at making these things. They're gonna tweak them, and they're gonna provide different textures and flavors, and it's gonna be a software as food.
Yeah, and Tony Seba, who we like to talk about, who has been talking a lot about this disruption that's coming with fake meat and precision fermentation. He has a new presentation, a slightly tweaked presentation that I saw recently, and he told a story I hadn't heard before, but it's the story of making insulin for human patients. So if you're diabetic, you need insulin, and in the early days, it was all extracted from animals. They took insulin from animals, packaged it, and that's what humans used to control their diabetes. But then eventually they figured out how to make it in a lab through, precision fermentation. And it became, way cheaper and way less intrusive for the poor animals that had to get it extracted. So, this is all coming super fast. The dairy industry is in particular trouble, according to Tony Seba. The whole dairy industry is likely to be one of the first to be really, really disrupted this decade because milk proteins, they're going to figure out how to make milk proteins. And so, milk and cheese products will soon be made with precision fermentation. So the dairy industry is looking at a very, very big disruption.
And Brian, I don't think they have any bloody idea.
Yeah.
I think that's quite, people get offended when around here when you serve American beef, let alone non-beef beef. So the thing about milk is that it's only 3.5%, and the rest is water. So you only have to deal with 3.5% of milk to make milk. And there's the thing is the milk will last longer. The milk will have a longer shelf life and be more locally produced and more green, and that's why we talk about it.
And milk proteins are an ingredient in so many things like cheese or, chocolate, milk chocolate.
One of my favorite meals, Brian. Chocolate right there. Let's get to the lightning round. Well, it's time for the lightning round, Brian. One of my favorite times of the year, times of the show. All kinds of stuff going on this week. We're trying to keep it short this week and not go too long, but the Biden administration on Wednesday released a blueprint showing how the nation could move toward producing almost half of its electricity from the sun by 2050. Personally, I think they could do better. Potentially a big step forward to fighting climate change, and one that will require vast upgrades to the electrical grid, which varies from region to region, the type of upgrades they need. There is little historical precedent for expanding solar energy, which contributed only 4% of the country's electricity last year. There's no precedent for upping it that quickly, but to achieve this growth, the country would have to double the amount of solar energy installed every year over the next 4 years, and then double it again by 2030. Doable. But you need a kick in the butt to do it, and Biden's got that foot that's ready to kick butts.
Well, we always hear stories about battery factories being proposed and built and billions of dollars, but we never seem to hear the stories about new solar panel factories. But they've got to be happening, and perhaps we'll start looking for those.
And the more they do it, the more cheaper they are, and there's competition. One factory develops a new way of doing it, and the other guy goes out of business or has to develop something that's even better. So it's highly competitive, although largely taking place in China. So with this large increase, with such a large increase laid out in this report, it is in line with most client scientists say is needed to stave off the worst effects of global warming. So hopefully they'll do it. Rivian's signature tank turn feature has been formally delayed. Are you disappointed in the lack of tank turn in your new Rivian?
Yeah, so this is a feature where all four wheels on the vehicle can turn independently with different motors, and so it could basically spin in place, was my understanding. But they've said the software is a bit more complicated than they thought it was going to be. But, like Tesla, this should be something that they should be able to add with a software update. And we're getting close to some Rivian trucks being released to the public very, very soon.
U.S. airlines boost their 2030 target for sustainable aviation by 50%. And this is why there's like 2 or 3 different canola crushing operations showing up near my house as for biodiesel or biofuels. And I'm not sold on that because sustainable doesn't mean carbon free. It means you can regrow something that you turn into fuel. Yes, but it doesn't mean it's carbon free, and sometimes it's worse. It's equally bad or somewhat offset, but not completely. It's not as good as what people say. So
we gotta stop burning stuff.
Why did 200 Bitcoin miners and oil and gas executives just have a secret meeting in Houston? Reporting from CNBC indicates it was primarily about getting dirty electricity to power more Bitcoin mining. How nice. One big topic of discussion using stranded natural gas to power Bitcoin mining rigs, which they did in Alberta. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago, which reduces greenhouse gas emissions supposedly and makes money for the gas providers. Well, I don't know about that. Do you?
No. Well, the case where that happened near us in Alberta, it was noisy and smelly, and they had to shut it down.
1 Bitcoin in 2009 took a few seconds of electricity to produce. Now it takes 9 years of household electricity to mine 1 Bitcoin. 9 years. They're valued at $50,000, but that's actually $12,500 worth of electricity. So my question to you, Mr. Stockton, is, because you're using that much electricity, don't you have to go green to save money?
Yeah, you would think, but there are certain places where fossil fuel electricity is quite cheap, I guess. There's weird edge cases, but you'd think that people would have a moral objection to it, that they would be smart enough to think maybe we shouldn't burn stuff just to get Bitcoin.
Getting back to plant-based meats for a moment, there was a Gallup study on the subject that said that 41% of people in the United States have tried plant-based meats, which I'm impressed. That's not even that many, slightly less than who are vaccinated. And of those respondents, 60% said they were likely to continue eating them. Not bad for
also
a first try. And the Technomic report found 30% of people are actively trying to reduce their meat consumption. I'm one of them. How about you?
Yeah, for sure. And if no other reason than cost. Meat is really expensive. It's always a huge hit at the grocery store. So the less, the better.
One of the traditional big auto firms, Renault, apparently even wants the deadline for the ICE sales in the EU to be delayed to 2040. To them, I say, adios! Rest in peace, Renault. Good.
That'd be au revoir, since they're French.
Pardon my French, it's not great. BC has a carbon tax rate for burning tires, and it varies depending on whether the tires are shredded or whole, which makes no sense at all.
Okay.
Something I learned on Twitter from a climate scientist who was trying to figure out why the heck that was going on. That's the kind of policies that make no sense. So, and finally this week, Brian, Volkswagen, and I find this very interesting, will crack an industry barrier by offering its used all-electric vehicles for lease. VW plans to include North America in the upcoming strategy. I tweeted this out. I found it very interesting on our Twitter account. clean energy pod. Executives recently shared this information with Automotive News, explaining that it's a way for the brand to maintain control over its valuable battery packs. Makes sense to me, because these packs are worth something, you know?
Yeah, they still retain a value even after the car has lived its useful life.
So there's all kinds of fun on the internet and whatnot of people saying, well, electric car batteries are just going to end up in the landfill. No, they're not. They're
too valuable.
They're too valuable. They're at least $1,000 on the market, you know, for anybody. If you're building an off-grid system, or if you're replenishing a pack on a EV that has some bad modules on it. And they realize that the cars, not so valuable. They'll go away. They'll rust away. They'll get used up. The batteries will still have a value, and they want to control that. So you'll be able to lease used EVs. That's amazing.
And of course, even after a second life for the batteries, then they can be recycled. So they're still worth something at that point.
That's right.
When they're broken down into their component materials.
That's right. Well, that's our time for this week. Consider rating and reviewing our show on iTunes, and we'll eventually read it on the show, I promise. It's been fun, Brian. We'll see you again next week.
See you next week.
And finally, Mercedes-Benz is set to reveal new electric cars next week at the Munich Auto Show, as well as a car that parks itself across 2 handicapped spots.